good morning, and welcome to one of the very best days of our lives. And the reason why I say that is because, my friends, in less than an hour at 9:30 this morning, Donald John Trump will become officially a convicted felon. This is a tremendous status change for this man. Up until this point, a jury had convicted Donald Trump of 34 felonies in the state of New York. And that is true. The jury had convicted him, found him guilty on those 34 counts of falsifying his business records to cover up the hush money payments made to Stormy Daniels to interfere in the election in 2016. That happened, right? We know. And that was a huge day. But today is even bigger because that is what I told you is a description of what a jury did. But that didn't officially, under the eyes of the law, change Donald Trump's status from just an ordinary person for whom we have tremendous contempt, who has done terrible things, including being an adjudicated rapist an adjudicated sexual abuser, which is the equivalent of rape according to the judge. We know these things about Donald Trump, but today at 9:30, when the sentencing is completed, Donald Trump's status will change to convicted felon. He will be the convict in chief. And that label, the label of convicted felon, will stick to him until, but only until, and only if he can get it removed on appeal. And so, my friends, for one of the first time in Donald Trump's life, time is no longer on his side. He thought the Supreme Court was going to halt the sentencing. And then he could delay and drag and drag his feet. And then maybe it would take forever to happen. But he wasn't able to do it because yesterday, kind of a miracle happened, which was this. You know that 6 of the 9 Supreme Court justices kissed his ass previously when they decided this summer that he, and maybe any former president, had a broader scope of immunity than we thought, right? But not all 6 of him went with it now. Thank you, Rosanna. Only 4 of them supported him. 2 of his besties defected. One was Chief Justice John Roberts, and the other was Amy Coney Barrett. So, friends, I'm just observing that every single woman on the Supreme Court said enough is enough. Face the fucking music, Donald Trump. And then John Roberts joined them. Now, could it be a coincidence? Correlation isn't causation. I don't want to be a gender essentialist, but let me tell you, I have seen and observed when it comes to putting up with his nonsense that there are so many more men who kiss the ring, who bow to him. And I don't think this is a genetic predisposition. I think this is a nature of how power works. Because the way people in the existing power structure get by is by scratching each other's back. We've heard about the old boys network. There can be all kinds of networks of people who look the other way to support each other, alliances. And this world of alliances is maybe hardwired into the people who've made it up to the top of the food chain, if they're men. But my observation, my friends, is that women these days, maybe not in the future, but women who have made it up to the top of the food chain haven't just gone along, right? Yeah, you may think they've had to accept the power system, but they've also had to be a little bit, thank you, Ada, little bit of a rebel. They've had to have their eyes clearly open, even if their mouths are shut always about what's going on. And I think they just had enough. I think they've had enough. So that is some of the news. Now, I want to tell you, I love this. I made this last night. Donald Trump is a convict in chief. I knew I wanted him on the thumbnail. And I checked in with my oldest kid, Emily, and I said, I'm thinking of the thumbnail. And she said, why don't you use some fake bars? And I found these bars and I just thought, he is screaming his way out of prison, because I think you all know that there is not going to be incarceration. He has screamed his way out of this shit, right? But he's still the convict in chief. The label will stick on him. Now, I would like to read to you the exact ruling that the Supreme Court made yesterday that made it clear. And by the way, let me just say, this happened around, I want to say 7:20 Eastern last night, because I was on Sirius XM Progress, the station with Dina Badala, whose show was on, and I'm often on every other Thursday night. And it was a joy to share with a fellow Nerd Avenger, Dean, this news. It was incredible. So here was the news, and I will blow this up for you. Here is the news. Okay. Order in pending case 24A666. I don't write this. 666, the devil. The application for stay presented to Justice Sotomayor. Remember, she presides over the Second Circuit for emergency stays. So the application for stay presented to Justice Sotomayor, and by her referred to the court, is denied for inter alia. That means, among other things, the following reasons. First, the alleged evidentiary violations at President-elect Trump's state court trial can be addressed in the ordinary course on appeal. Second, the burden that sentencing will impose on the president-elect's responsibilities is relatively insubstantial in light of the trial court's stated intent to impose a sentence of unconditional discharge after a brief virtual hearing. And then here, Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, Justice Gorsuch, and Justice Kavanaugh would grant the application. What does that mean? Couple things. The last part is they would have stayed. Those four gentlemen, in order of seniority, would have stayed this and let Donald Trump off the hook from the sentencing. What else did you see here? I noticed that had repeatedly the language of calling Donald Trump the president-elect, right? And he leaned into his status heavily, trying to argue, unsuccessfully in his brief, that as president-elect, he also enjoyed some kind of immunity from criminal prosecution. Of course, the five justices didn't buy that. However, they do lean into that status of president-elect, suggesting that, and this is the genius move on Judge Juan Merchan's part, suggesting that if Merchan had done one of two things, or both, this wouldn't have gone the way we wanted it to. So let's be clear. The majority here who decided to let Donald Trump be sentenced today at 9:30 a.m., right? We're talking about around 45 minutes from now. The fact that Merchan decided to make it an unconditional release and not impose any kind of incarceration, not even an electronic bracelet, not even an hour in the lockup. The fact that Donald Trump will not face incarceration was a deciding factor here for this majority. Secondly, in addition to that, the fact that Merchan will allow him to zoom in to his sentencing also makes it a deciding factor. It is not such an inconvenience to the president-elect who might be planning his transition. We have seen him planning. He's planning to invade Canada. He's planning to rename the Gulf of Mexico. He's planning to take Greenland by force. He wants Panama. We have seen all of his plans. How about the price of eggs? I don't know. Okay, we've seen those plans. And this court is not going to judge those plans. But this court, at least the majority here, that let this fly, said, this is just a brief sentencing. No big deal. fucking brilliant move. So for all the folks who were suspicious and even today are angry, and we'll address this in a second, that Donald Trump got a slap on the wrist, I've got a couple of responses. I've got this strategic response, and I'm also going to tell you the legal one in a second about these particular charges. Now, that is where we are regarding Donald Trump's status, that he will forever be the convict in chief until he, if he's able to, through an appeals process, get that lifted from his title. But, he will be the first person to ever take the office of the presidency as a convicted felon. And let me tell you, that feels really good. Now, I want to tell you my attitude going into both this sentencing as well as the next, hopefully no more than 4 years of the Trump administration, 4 years at the most. This is something I figured out at the beginning of 2017, which is this. Back in 2017, we said this is uncharted territory. We didn't know what we were dealing with. Well, yeah, we have seen this before, but it's worse this time. So I'm going to tell you that we don't actually know where we're going. And someone else is driving the car, and we're like those kids in the back seat, and we're saying, are we there yet? And we don't have full control of what happens next. And some of the things that are going to happen next have nothing to do directly with the orange fascist, right? We have problems with climate change. We have, homes burning down. We have the usual problems of daily life in society, whether it's due to things like climate change that we're not addressing adequately, or just fortune and fate, right? So all of that is ahead of us. But when it comes to Donald Trump, I think it's really important to take the wins. And what I called this back in the last administration is savoring the small victories along the way. Savor them. And this is where I want to tell you I was super frustrated. After I got off SiriusXM with Dean last night, Dean Abdallah, I decided to listen to the coverage over on MSNBC to see how they were covering this ruling by the Supreme Court that Donald Trump had to face the sentencing. And I have to say, no offense to either commentator, two wonderful lawyers. One was Lisa Rubin, and I'm now forgetting the other one. I've met them both in person. But I did not appreciate the kind of breathless, sort of full of nervous energy presentation. Plus, first admitting, that they were wrong. They thought for sure this court was going to delay the sentencing. One, that's fine. I admit when I'm wrong. But what I didn't appreciate was them then pivoting, saying, well, this is really terrible because he should have gotten a sentence and all this. Now, look, I understand, and I am a critical thinker, and I can sit here and tell you what the alternatives would have been. And maybe that's their role as legal commentators. But I am not sitting here just as someone analyzing the law for you, right? I am looking at law money with a dash of snark, but I am here as a citizen. I am here as a human being who needs to get those normal endorphin hits from the good things. So I am savoring this victory, and it's not a small one. And I hope that you will join me in that. Donald Trump, in less than an hour, will become a convicted felon. Now, you may ask a couple questions. What if he doesn't show up? What if he doesn't actually come to court? Well, here's the good news. It doesn't matter because he was given a Zoom option. You can imagine the claim that, oh, my plane got delayed or all these things. And then could you really sentence someone in absentia? But in this instance, he can Zoom in. And unless he is in a vegetative state or worse, someone could hold up an iPhone to his face and he can Zoom in. So if he does not show up this morning for his sentencing, I believe he will still be sentenced. Now, the next question. So many good ones. And I think it was early this morning. And I want to give you credit. Tina, I have the best facial expressions. Oh my God, I am holding back. Someone asked this morning, who was it? It was a really good question. And I am scrolling back in the chat. Someone tell me. Oh my God. Jaroslav, thank you. Thank you. Anyway, way back this morning, someone asked me the question, super good question. Wait a second. Why did Michael Cohen get a serious prison sentence stemming from the very same activity in which Donald Trump engaged in? Now, a couple things. Michael Cohen had two different cases. He had one out of New York and one out of DC. But with regard to his engagement in this hush money payment situation, no poker face. I can have one, but you'd have to, here's the thing, Kissy Cat. I see. I can have a poker face, guys, but you got to pay me a lot of more money for a poker face, right? The thing about freedom, which we've learned, is freedom is being able to express your true self. And I have that freedom. I'm lucky. Not everybody does. And so no poker face for me. Now, let's go back to the sentencing of Michael Cohen. So Michael Cohen, right, he was the person at Donald Trump's direction, right? Donald Trump was like, what would we call him in the indictment? Person number one or individual one. Donald Trump was individual one. And we know in the sentencing of Michael Cohen that Bill Barr, who was the attorney general, put pressure on the prosecutors out of the Southern District of New York to tone down the stuff that was included about Donald Trump's participation. But the reason why Michael Cohen faced heavier sentencing is because the statutes under which Michael Cohen pleaded guilty were the federal statutes. And as you may remember, Merrick Garland decided not to pursue Donald Trump. In the excuse that people who defend Merrick Garland, and some of them are my friends, but the excuse that people give in defense of Merrick Garland is that under Bill Barr's regime, they decided not to prosecute Donald Trump. And so that's a norm. He wasn't going to break the norm. So with regard to the hush money payments, Merrick Garland didn't bring the case. It took the state of New York, or I should say rather, the Manhattan District Attorney to look at those same set of facts and decide to bring charges. Now, these are two sovereigns, so the Manhattan District Attorney, who is in charge of enforcing criminal laws from New York in that area, in Manhattan, in that county, they decided to bring this case. Meanwhile, there was nothing stopping Merrick Garland from bringing the case other than his desire not to do his job for the American people. And then he ran the clock. He ran the clock in terms of the statute of limitations. So that is one reason. Now, the second reason why Donald Trump is not, you could ask, let's ask a legal question. Strategically, I said it was really good for Mershon to do what he did. But legally, were his hands tied? And I think I have showed you previously the chart of the different, this was done by, I feel like it was done by Norm Eisen over on Just Security website. And they went through and took a look at prior sentencing of people in New York who had been convicted of falsifying business records, the felony of that. And as you may know, in doing so, we saw that some people had prison sentences. Now, keep in mind, however, that nearly all of them that were convicted of falsifying business records and faced prison sentences, even if it was coming in on the weekend to serve your incarceration, nearly all of them were charged not just with falsification of business records, but were charged with other crimes as well. And if they weren't, they actually had past convictions. So it's not entirely out of the ordinary that this kind of criminal conviction and sentencing might come with a very light touch out of New York. So I just want to let you know that when it comes to Judge Mershon, he played this straight. he did what I think a judge should do in this situation. And the problem really here was Merrick Garland dragging his feet. Should I say it again? But almost every legal expert I know believed the minute he was sworn in March of 2021 that Merrick Garland should have appointed a special counsel, or at least one of them, to deal with all of the outstanding criminal allegations against Donald Trump, including the insurrection, including the leftover information like this hush money situation that stemmed from the Mueller report, the obstruction in the Mueller report. All of it should have been handed over completely to someone outside of the Biden administration. It should have happened ethically, and he didn't do it. And I don't give a crap about people who said it doesn't matter, the FBI was still investigating. No, there should have been a special counsel at the beginning. At the beginning. Okay, so that is what I'm saying. Now, I'm going to ask the mods to take a look for me and keep your eye to the corner of your eye. I want to keep my eye on the news about the sentencing. I know that Donald Trump doesn't have to zoom in until 9:30. My understanding is that this is not going to be open to the public. In other words, the judge will be sitting right there in the courtroom. And it's my understanding that the judge will be in the courtroom, and that Donald Trump himself will be possibly zooming in unless he attends in person. And his lawyers will be there in person, and whoever in the public has come into the courtroom will be there in person. But my understanding is there's not going to be cameras. I mean, just sticking with what the judge has done before, there won't be cameras in the courtroom. So I think the best thing we can do here as we get to 9:30, because I'm going to stick around with you, is I'm going to loop in at 9:30, or as we get to the end of the show, I'm going to loop in and we can watch together the news commentary. I think I'm going to try to do MSNBC if I can do this properly. And we can watch together to see. Oh, thanks, Susan. Is going to jump over to coverage now. And then, Susan, just give me a heads up of when I should feed it in. I can feed that in also soon, but I want to cover our full show. Okay, so that is the big news of the day, but we have more. I want to share with you a little bit, just a tiny bit from Jimmy Carter's funeral, because I know that you probably saw a lot today. I still have my person of the day, and today I learned. Now, Crazy Town, my friends, is here too. So we'll do that all, we'll fit that all in before the sentencing. So let me share with you from the Carter funeral something that touched me. And I took notes on this as I was watching. To me, one of the most significant parts of the funeral was something that Walter Mondale's son had to say. And Walter Mondale had written this prior to his death. Now remember, Mondale had served as Jimmy Carter's vice president. And this just hit me, that apparently Mondale and Carter had a conversation. And I think this is what Mondale and Carter used to say to each other about their legacy. Remember, this was spoken in the church while Donald Trump was sitting there. We told the truth, we obeyed the law, and we kept the peace. We told the truth, we obeyed the law, and we kept the peace. All of this is true, and let's just look at each of those elements and ask ourselves about Donald Trump. Donald Trump. Does he tell the truth? No, almost never. If his lips are moving, he's probably lying. Thank you, Colette. Let's look at the next element. Did he obey the law? Donald Trump, as of yesterday's funeral, was about to be, and now he still is about to be, sentenced. Criminally sentenced. So no, doesn't tell the truth, doesn't obey the law. How about keeping the peace? How's Donald Trump doing on that? He's threatening to invade our allies. So yeah, this funeral was about Jimmy Carter. But remember, Jimmy Carter designed his funeral ceremony. This was, as we would say, a subtweet from the great beyond. Thank you, Jimmy. Now, there's more about this funeral that I enjoyed and didn't so much enjoy. So I want to show you this. I still can't figure out what was going on here. This is, you look at the shot, here is the two recent presidents next to each other. You have Barack Obama, you have Donald Trump. And I believe, as I said on Blue Sky, we need a lip reader stat. You see Melania over there looking like an angry pilgrim. But here's the deal. I know maybe there's this special club. And I guess I should think about this. Let me just put that back, sorry. I understand that maybe having access to Donald Trump and laughing at his inane jokes might actually maybe help us not all die from his idiocy. But at the same time, I have to tell you, I didn't love seeing this. And I'd like to understand a little bit better what was going on, because there's an alternative to playing the role here. And that alternative to playing the role is Karen Pence. Now, Karen Pence and I probably don't see eye to eye, so to speak, on almost anything. Politically, maybe there are some things we share, but I don't think that's entirely the case. But let me show you what she did. This is what Karen Pence did. And in a world of people who decide to suck up or laugh at the orange fascist, be Karen Pence. Let's play this now. And I'm going to make this big enough so you can see what she did.
Good morning to you. We can see President-elect Trump now entering the room for this morning's service.
Al Gore, Mike Pence there with former President Trump. I'm not sure former Vice President Pence and Donald Trump have seen each other.
Let me just wind that back. Do you see Karen? Also known as Mother. Karen Pence sat in the pew and she did not get out of her seat. She did not lift her hand. She did not lift her head. When Melania put her hand down, she shook that. She shook Melania's hand, but she did not stand up. Let me just call us back to the beginning of the show about women. Donald Trump wanted to have Mike Pence killed back in 2017. We know that. Donald Trump was indifferent to people trying to attack Mike Pence. Mike Pence stayed on the ground so he could certify the election in 2021. I just said 2017, but I meant 2021. So Karen Pence decides, like a normal human being, not to shake the hand of the man who wanted her husband to break the law, to destroy the republic, and to be killed. But Mike Pence shook his hand. I don't get it, guys. I just don't get it. But good for Karen Pence. Now, one more thing. It's 9:03. I have not forgotten that Donald Trump will be sentenced. I'm almost giddy. But, this is about as giddy as I get. Hold on. Let me sip some coffee. The other piece of the funeral was other pieces. I really enjoyed hearing Steve Ford, Gerald Ford's son, read the eulogy his father had prepared. It was touching to watch this. And it was touching to hear about the friendship the two of them forged over the years, even though they didn't agree. Now, I think to me, there's a huge difference between Gerald Ford and Jimmy Carter finding common ground. Then that to me is very different than, and I don't mean to criticize Barack Obama. I'm just speaking, honestly with you. You don't see it as the same thing as Barack Obama yucking it up with Donald Trump, who is not a former president. He is the president-elect, and he is a danger. So maybe there's something going on to keep access. I don't know, but I'm just saying I see it as different. Okay, so let's listen to Jason Carter, the sweetest thing, and this will be my last part of the funeral. Here we go.
And demonstrating their Depression-era roots, they had a little rack next to the sink where they would hang Ziploc bags to dry. And demonstrating that they changed with the times. Eventually, he did get a cell phone, and one time he called me sort of early on in that process. And on my phone, it said, "Papa Mobile." So I answered it, of course. I said, "Hey, Papa." He said, "Who's this?" I said, "This is Jason." He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm not doing anything. You called me." He said, "I didn't call you. I'm taking a picture."
Love it. Love it. Very sweet. We saw many sides of this man. Okay, guys, I hear you in the chat. I'm not blaming Obama. Okay, guys, I get it. He sat next to him. I'm just expressing, thanks, Susan's going back to check. I'm just expressing my feelings. It's complicated, right? Let's have a discussion. Like, I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. I think we can have a conversation about, what you would have done in that situation. I'm not super angry. If I had an opportunity to speak with President Obama about it, with Barack Obama, I would say, what were you thinking? Am I wrong? But did I not see Michelle there? Was Michelle there at the funeral? Am I missing something? Can you all tell me in the chat? Thanks, Roxanne. We do have to live together. But was Michelle at the funeral? Did she decide to skip? I don't know. Maybe she was sick. I don't know. Someone might be able to, oh, she wasn't there. Maybe Michelle, kind of like Karen Pence, was like, I'm no bullshit, so I'm just going to stay home. I don't think Michelle has a poker face either. I think she's a little bit like me. Now, one last thing. I love this. My friend, Lita Seletsky, and you should know her work. Lita Seletsky is an incredible writer, and her father happened to be she wrote a book called The Kneeling Man. Her father was on the balcony after MLK was shot. And the book, The Kneeling Man, is the I think one of the most incredible sort of self-investigative stories about her father. The accusations that he was part of the intelligence service, her trying to dig into that, as well as her better understanding of herself and her relationship with him. I cannot recommend The Kneeling Man enough. I did an interview with her on my podcast that I used to have called Booked Up, but really it's a fabulous book, and she is a lovely person. And here is what she had to say. She shared on Blue Sky, and let me blow it up for you guys. Oh my gosh, let me make it even. I think this is about as big as I can make it. Okay, so this is this image, and it says, this Carter Center photo from a highly specific angle that hides the terrible man behind a pillar is feeding me. Just so you know, the Carter Center apparently has a Twitter account, and they showed this photo, and it says, beautiful moments from the service at Washington National Cathedral this morning, honoring former President Jimmy Carter. And can you see where the photographer is seated? You can see Barack Obama, and you can see Doug Emhoff, but I think you all know who is being hidden by the pillar. So if you didn't understand what the Carter Center was doing, now you know. Now you know. So some people ask, why weren't there spaces here or there? I think Jimmy Carter laid out the plan for where people would sit at this funeral, and people obeyed, so to speak. But the Carter Center did not want Donald Trump in the photo. So they had the photographer down on the ground at that angle, kind of like how Michelle Obama decided not to be there. Now, I don't know why she was not there. Okay, guys, it is 9:09. We're getting closer to the convict in chief, but I have now to turn to our person of the day. And our person of the day is an actor. I wasn't as aware of his work because I'm not the biggest soap opera enthusiast, or no offense. I think when I was a kid, I watched General Hospital. That was my show, but I'm not as familiar with Eric Braden's work. I believe that Eric Braden was he's a German American actor, and he is known for his role, I think, on the soap opera The Young and the Restless. But today, I'm sharing what he had to say yesterday about the old and the fascist president. So I've got a double, what do we say, double helping or double dose of a person of the day. So let me share this with you.
Everyone is really trying to do their damn best, okay? And some idiot, the orange idiot, went on television, your fellow network, and claimed all kinds of things about Newsom and California and the water distribution. All nonsense, disinformation, period. There's a guy on your show that does fact-checking. I like him a lot. It's a breath of fresh air.
Dan Dale.
Say hello to him. He's very, very good. And
I love it. Okay, that's part one. Everyone tells me the character he plays on The Young and the Restless is a guy named Victor Newman. And lovely. But there's more. Second helping of person of the day, Eric Braden. This is a little more serious. And I take this seriously. Let's take a listen to the next thing Eric Braden had to say.
what some of these characters are now disseminating on one particular network and on some podcasts is outrageous and very damaging to our nation. This is a great nation. Trust me. I know whereof I speak. I come from a nation that believed in fascist ideology for a while. Okay? And we certainly will not want to go into that again, but we are close to it. Because people want to simplify complex problems. The essence of fascism is to simplify complex problems and feed people who don't have time to read some bullshit. Okay?
Wow. Let's just listen to that last bit. And, again, he's from Germany. He knows what he's talking about. Let's listen to this.
The essence of fascism is to simplify complex problems and feed people who don't have time to read some bullshit. Okay?
Wow. Now, they say actors aren't always intelligent, right? They're not the characters they play. This man is more than the characters he plays. Yes, I love that. The essence of fascism is to simplify things for people who don't have time to pay attention or read, and you feed them all kinds of bullshit. We're not going to do that here, right? I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to grapple, we saw the grappling between us about, was it okay what Obama did, blah, 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 blah. We can have that conversation. There's no right or wrong in that, right? That's a judgment call, and we will talk about that. Now, we are getting closer. It is 9:13. We are getting closer to Donald Trump being convict in chief. And if I had thought it through, I would have made some microwave popcorn to enjoy. But it is way too early for me to enjoy popcorn. Popcorn for me is not for breakfast. Popcorn, we all know, is for dinner. So sorry, guys, no popcorn, but I do have some coffee. So whatever you are imbibing at this hour, join me. Now, I think what I want to remind you, we've done our person of the day, right? We have done our lead story, which we'll return to. We've talked about Carter's funeral, and how we should, in a world of suck-ups, we should all be Karen Pence. I got to tell you, if someone tried to get Michael killed or break the law, sure as fuck I wouldn't stand up in their presence or shake their hand. In fact, if the camera were on me, I would have the biggest eye roll. And I probably would have been like this, like, don't come near me. I would have made the big, like, gesture of that. And I might even have done to them. Although that is probably a little rude to do the FU, universal sign language gesture. Now, what is my today I learned? Today I learned that there is, I know that that area between, is it Louisiana and Florida? Am I getting the map right? Right? What we, that little space. Between all of them, I guess it goes from Texas and Louisiana and Alabama and Georgia and Florida, that area that we right now refer to as the Gulf of Mexico. I don't know if you've heard, but today I learned what the new name of that area is. And I bet you have not heard this yet. It is the Gulf of Cheaper Eggs. I'm sorry. It's so ridiculous that Donald Trump wants to rename it the Gulf of America. And I love this because this comes from Adam Parkamenko. I don't know if he made it, but he put it up on Blue Sky, the Gulf of Cheaper Eggs. Like whatever Donald Trump does, is this the Gulf of cheaper groceries? He promised that, right? What is this? Now, okay. Let us now talk a bit before we get to our crazy town moment. Again, about debunking lies. And I want to put this up here once again because it is going to be a theme of this show and a theme of this administration. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, right? And Gulag Archipelago, the runaway bestseller. I don't even know if that was true, but it was a bestseller in the 70s. He said, the simple step of a courageous individual is not to take part in the lie. And today, this courageous individual not taking part in the lie is Jessica Tarlov on Fox News. And I love what she does on that show. So I'm going to play with you. The Gulf of Cheap Eggs. Thank you. I can't stop laughing. I'm going to play with you how Tarlov has been dealing on Fox News with debunking all of the lies around the wildfires that are spreading and destroying and devastating and killing and depressing people in California and across the world. Okay, I'm going to play for you what she had to say here. Let's do it.
There's also, which I think is particularly the most damaging story, which is that there was $17 million cut from the fire budget. And that's also inaccurate. So last year's budget had an extra $17 million because they bought one-off expenses. These SCBAs for respiratory protection for firefighters and new suits. Those aren't in the new budget because you buy them once every several years. Also, there's an additional $50 million that's been set aside for the fire department. And when they were doing the budget negotiations, it wasn't finished. So that money is coming. There will actually be more money in the fire budget next year.
Okay, so I know that was probably a little bit in the weeds. At least it was for me this early in the morning. But what she's trying to do is she's trying to go through, which is sometimes a thankless task. She's trying to use fact checking to suggest that the numbers that are being thrown around to attack Gavin Newsom in California and blame them for the spreading fires are a load of nonsense. Okay, that is true. Now, I got something else to tell you. This is also amazing legal news before we get to Crazy Town. I don't know if you can handle all this good news, but remember, we are waiting for Jack Smith to release the report to the public, or rather at this point, Merrick Garland, the report, the 2-volume report about Donald Trump's 2 criminal cases, not the one in New York, but these are the 2 federal criminal cases, one out of DC and one out of Florida. And there are 2 different volumes. And as soon as Walt Nada and I'm forgetting the Oliveira gentleman's name, as soon as their lawyers saw drafts of the volume about them, about the documents that they were allegedly involved in hiding, in the obstruction they were allegedly engaged in, right? They've been indicted for that. Their lawyers saw it. And of course, probably Donald Trump's lawyers then saw it. And Donald Trump ran in to Judge Cannon's courtroom, even though she had dismissed the case. Remember, the special counsel Jack Smith had said the case against Donald Trump was being dismissed, but they were still pursuing the case against Nauta and Oliveira, which we know Donald Trump's AG will drop, but they were still pursuing it. So they had appealed that to the 11th Circuit. Okay. So Eileen Cannon put this on hold, and the 11th Circuit yesterday said, it's okay. It's fine. Go ahead and release the reports right now. The problem, though, is the 11th Circuit still kept in place a 3-day hold that Cannon had put on it. So in other words, yesterday, I think the 11th Circuit said it's fine. So the 3-day hold will be Friday, maybe Monday, Tuesday. So maybe it's not until Wednesday that this report can be released. In the meantime, though, that gives Donald Trump the opportunity to appeal the 11th Circuit decision up to the United States Supreme Court. So we're likely to see another Supreme Court decision pretty soon, early next week or mid next week, about whether Merrick Garland can release the reports. Now, here's the other problem. For whatever reason, Merrick Garland has made the stupid judgment, and I know it's shocking that he would make a stupid judgment, that he only wants to publicly release the volume about the insurrection. And then as for the volume about the documents, he only wants to give that to the heads and the ranking members of the congressional committees because he doesn't believe they will leak them. Now, here's the deal. How stupid is this? The minute Donald Trump becomes president, his attorney general is going to drop the cases against these guys. So why the fuck doesn't the special counsel drop the cases against these guys and then let all the reports come out? The reason why many of us wants to see the documents case report is because what we understand, what I'm hearing, what I'm understanding is that the documents case report will tell us what Donald Trump planned to do with the documents. He was not keeping them in bankers' boxes in the bathroom at Mar-a-Lago and on the stages and in rooms here and there and in his bedroom and wherever the fuck he kept these for the hell of it. Where he was showing them to show off. But what was he planning to do with that? We need to know that. And what else we need to know is the names of all the people. I mean, dismiss all of it, all the people who were involved in this, because some of them are facing Senate confirmation hearings this coming week. I want to see all of it, period. And I'm frustrated that we will not do that. It is 9:22. We're almost at 9:30, and I have time now to share with you, a little crazy town. Let us do it, guys. Crazy town. This is a long show today, but we deserve it. Why am I not hearing crazy town? Are you hearing it? I'm not hearing my crazy town. In my comments, are you hearing crazy town? I'm sad. You hear it? Oh. Now that is sad for me. Something happened. Okay. Something happened with what I'm hearing. That makes me sad, but I'll fix it. Okay, guys. So we, for Crazy Town, have this. We have for Crazy Town the reminder that freedom's just another word for nothing left to lose, that this is who is coming to kiss Donald Trump's ring. Let's listen.
Bezos came, Bill Gates came, Mark Zuckerberg came. Many of them came numerous times. The bankers have all come. Everybody's coming.
And the bankers. Everybody's coming. I heard a list of names. Didn't hear about any women on those lists. Now, maybe some of the bankers are coming. This is oligarchy happening, and none of these people can say fuck you to Donald Trump. But let's remember that we can. And at the end of the day, I believe all we have is our dignity. And so, let's read this again, Mark Elias. I realized today right? This was on Tuesday. I realized today that I am more powerful than Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, and Elon Musk, and all those bankers, guys. Because I can say, fuck you, Donald Trump. They may be richer, but I am more powerful. And that is a trade I would make every single day. That is a trade, my friends, that I too would make every single day. Now, what I want to do now is, guys, what I want to do now is bring in for you a feed. And I think I can manage this, and you will just have to tell me whether you're hearing it. So give me a second. I'm going to bring in my MSNBC feed. And I'm in here. Hold on. And let's see if you guys can hear it. Let me share screen.
Do that if he hadn't changed these rules, and that would put him at odds with the president. The question's going to be, though, Mika, for users, right?
Can you hear
we
this?
have to remember, at the end of the day, if Mark Zuckerberg and all these business leaders make business decisions to make money, remember,
yes,
we're the ones who use the product. So no longer is there fact checking. And remember, they also rolled back the rules on hate speech. So if now anyone can say anything and there's no protections, then all the people that use these platforms need to decide, do I want to be here? Do I want to drive in a car with no seatbelts? Do I want to get on a roller coaster with no safety protections whatsoever? And if users suddenly say no, well, then advertisers will say no. Then Mark Zuckerberg will have a different business decision to make. But right now, they're making...
Okay, so I am muting right now Stephanie Rule, who I love, for a second. I am muting her because she's now talking about some new developments over at Facebook. I don't know if you saw, and here's Andrew Ross Sorkin, I'll listen to in a second, that Mark Zuckerberg has come up with these new rules of all the kinds of hate speech that they will allow. I will unmute this for you now so we can listen together.
On X, and other folks who may not love what's happening on X but stay on X, in the same way that we hear about privacy concerns at some site, or you hear about information getting stolen on some site, and then we go back to that same store online the next day. And so there is a question, and I think that Mark Zuckerberg is recognizing that math.
But especially the FTC case coming up. Imagine, that is gargantuan.
Right.
It could be hugely damaging to his business. That thing could disappear. And he could also now have Donald Trump in his pocket, helping him with other issues as he's facing governments on the other side of the world.
So let's now turn to the latest economic news. The December jobs report released just moments ago, and it shows that the U.S. economy added 256,000 jobs in December, much, much higher than the 155,000 that economists expected. The unemployment rate edged down to 4.1%. So, Christine, what's your read here? It came in way over what was expected.
Boom. I mean, the last 2 years, all of these worries about a slowing job market have just not come to fruition. I mean, economists have been worried that it's going to slow meaningfully, and it hasn't. This is a decent. I was even joking with my producers that before 2020, a number like this, we would be screaming from the rooftops, 256,000 jobs created. This will be booming in pre-COVID times. This finishes the year on a strong note, 16 million jobs in the Biden administration, more than 2 million this year. That's a good position to hand to the next president.
That was my question to you. Yep. What does this tell us as the economy that Donald Trump's about to inherit?
He is inheriting a very good economy. The complicating factor, and it's interesting because also the stock market went down on the back of this good news. It was sort of a good news meets, at least in the marketplace, bad news situation, because the question is, does inflation persist and persist longer? And what does the Federal Reserve do?
Guys, I'm muting this. Can someone tell me the best link that I can link in for us so that we can actually be listening to the same thing? So I'm seeing Stephanie Rule and Andrew Ross Sorkin talk, but I am trying to actually get a feed so we can hear about what is going on in the courtroom right now. So let me see if I can get this to go back.
Hearing for President-elect Trump's criminal hush money case is about to get underway. We're going to get a live report from outside the New York City courtroom in just a moment. But first, let's bring in MSNBC legal analyst Danny Savalos. Danny, what can we expect today?
Unlike most sentencing hearings for the prosecutor and the defense attorney, it's a big question what the judge is going to do. This is the rare occasion where the judge is going to do. And it's likely Trump's going to get something called an unconditional discharge. A conditional discharge means, hey, you do some things, you report to probation, you jump through some hoops, you come back and that'll be the end of your sentence. This is even better than that. It's essentially your sentence is no sentence. There are no conditions attached to that sentence. No probation, no picking up trash on the side of the road, no community service, no nothing. That is your punishment, no punishment. So the judge needs to put some things on the record. The law requires that. He has to explain why he's giving this sentence. That might take some time, but other than that, this may be shorter than your average sentencing hearing.
All right, we'll be following this as it happens. MSNBC legal analyst Danny Savalos, thank you very much. We're going to go live outside the New York City courthouse in just a moment after a quick break. We'll be right back.
Okay, we don't need to... Guys, we can talk. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment because I don't need to have you guys watch the advertisements. And someone saying, can we not watch Mika? Sure. I mean, I could go to CNN. That's an option. Let's go to CNN. See if I can share that. I don't know if I'm going to have as easy of a day. You know what? I think, guys, we're gonna go with the MSNBC folks because I think the commentary will be better. Yes, Lisa Marie, AP. Someone says, can we do AP? Do they have a live video feed? Let's see. I don't know. I want us to have a live video feed, and I just don't know if they are doing that, guys. So if somebody. I'm sticking with MSNBC. And if you want to give me a link, Roxanne Epstein says PBS. Let me see if I can get my PBS link going and see if I can watch it live. And it's not as easy as you would think. I think I'm going to get to live TV. Oh, well, guys. Where I am, my live PBS station is playing Dora the Explorer. And so I am sorry to tell you that I am not going to be able to share with you. I'm not going to be able to share the PBS station with you. But I am going to be sharing MSNBC, and I'm sorry, but that is my plan. And I see that, I'm going to hide that for you for now. But when it's time, I'm going to be bringing back MSNBC and we will watch it. Susan says AP is live streaming. I'm having a hard time for my computer, so I'm going to stick with MSNBC. And I will know the legal analyst there. So guys, thank you. We have a huge number of people watching together. We are joining together. We are staying live. I cannot wait. I have my eye on what's going on MSNBC. I can see, and the minute we are back from commercial break, or they are back from commercial break, I will start sharing with you again. I couldn't be more excited to do this. I think maybe you can hear, so I think I'm gonna stop that so you don't have to hear this weird commercial. Okay, so let us talk about what is happening. Right now, Donald Trump is about to become convict in chief. And we will not be able to be inside of the courtroom because even though Donald Trump is zooming in, the public does not have that same right. There will be reporters and other observers, people who stood in line to get into the courtroom who will be inside. And then, of course, we have journalists who will be outside the courtroom reporting on what they have heard is going on inside. Now, some judges allow reporters to still have, either in the room itself or in a spillover room, their phones, not to film, but to at least communicate to others outside. So what we know now is that Donald Trump's attorneys are in the courtroom, and that Donald Trump himself, I believe, will. I'm hearing from Kathleen that Lawrence O'Donnell said he would be inside the courtroom. I think this is great. Here we go. Let me add this to our screen. Here we go, and let me unmute it for you.
Yasmin, set the scene for us.
Yasmin is.
Yeah, Mika, I'm taking a look at my Google Doc now as we're kind of getting set to hear this hearing this morning and the sentencing of President-elect Donald Trump, who's set to take the White House in just 10 days from now as a felon after the sentencing is in fact wrapped today. And what I'm hearing from inside the courtroom as of now is Emile Beauvais for the defense is already seated along with the prosecution. DA Alvin Bragg is in the courtroom as well. We also know Todd Blanche and President-elect Donald Trump are seated together via live stream from Mar-a-Lago. Judge Juan Merchan has also taken the bench as of 9:34 this morning. Let's talk through a little bit, Amika, how we got here, right? There was 2 delays to this sentencing, originally set for July and then delayed again after then candidate Trump was elected, President-elect Donald Trump, come November. So here we are now, January 10th, and we understand where Merchan is going to land this thing, as Danny talked about earlier before the break, in which he will call for an unconditional discharge, essentially meaning no penalty there. But in fact, Donald Trump will walk out today as a felon and be inaugurated, go through his inauguration and become the next president of the United States as a felon, entering the White House in just 10 days from now. We'll likely hear from the prosecution first, followed by the defense, possibly hearing from the president-elect himself from Mar-a-Lago, and then following that, we'll hear from Judge Juan Merchan, in which he'll be issuing his sentencing. But of course, this is the culmination after a months-long trial in the spring, which we covered 24/7, along with a years-long story of the hush money trial involving adult film star Stormy Daniels. Mika.
All right, Yasmin, stay with us as the sentencing is carried out. Just a little procedural thing here. One of the reasons she's there is she's going to be taking in all the texts from reporters and producers we have inside the courthouse. There's no audio, no video being provided, so the reporters are able to disseminate the information. Yasmin will get it to us as soon as possible. Let's bring in former U.S. Attorney and MSNBC contributor Chuck Rosenberg, former state attorney for Palm Beach County, Florida, Dave Ehrenberg, and MSNBC legal analyst Charles Coleman. Great group to have. Chuck, I'll start with you. What are you watching for as this plays out today?
Well, we know a good bit about what might happen. Judge Merchan, Mika, has already told us that he is inclined to an unconditional discharge, meaning a sentence of no sentence. That's unusual and highly unusual. In all my years as a federal prosecutor, I've never seen anything like it. Almost always there's a term of incarceration or at least supervised release, probation, community service, a fine, restitution. Something attaches to the conviction. And here Judge Merchan has said there will be no sentence. But what that means, too, and this is important, is that the underlying criminal case is over. The judgment is final. Mr. Trump, of course, has the right to appeal to a higher court in New York State, but the sentencing proceeding puts an end to the underlying case. It makes Mr. Trump a felon before he assumes office for the second time. I am looking to see whether or not he has anything to say. Many defendants do, some don't. I don't imagine that he will be apologetic.
But felon almost in name only, Chuck. Are there any tangible consequences? Because when and if we do hear from Donald Trump, he's going to say this is political persecution, it's a witch hunt. He's not going to take ownership of it.
All right, so are there any practical consequences, Stephanie?
For the layman like me?
No.
So he wins?
Well, he's still convicted, and perhaps you draw some sustenance from that. I do. A jury of his peers found him guilty by proof beyond a reasonable doubt, and unanimously so. That means something to me.
Right.
But
me too.
Does he serve time? Does he have to pay a fine? It doesn't seem like that will be the case.
So, Charles, walk us through what we will expect to hear about today. We, of course, won't see it with our own eyes. We're grateful that we'll have some reporters there in the building. And your expectations from what we will hear from the judge and potentially Donald Trump.
Well, John, what I first expect for prosecutors to do is to make an application before the court for a different type of sentence. They're going to lay out the severity of the crime, the significance, and ask the judge to consider a different sentence, knowing that the judge is not going to do that. But to preserve the record and to preserve any sort of issues that might be appealable or their position on an appealable issue, they are absolutely going to make that application before the court. The judge is going to actually say, more likely than not, that he has considered a variety of different options in terms of what he could do around sentencing Donald Trump and ultimately go along with what he has already previously decided, which is this unconditional discharge. He is going to do a lot on the record about explaining the severity of the crime and the uniqueness of the situation as to try to justify it. But to go back to Steph's point, at the end of the day, this is going to be nothing. This is going to be someone who walks out of the court, and to the naked eye, the layperson will not be able to distinguish Donald Trump from a free man who is not convicted. And so you're talking about a convicted felon versus a free man, and no virtual difference between how the justice system has treated them at the end of the day. And I think that that is a true travesty that hasn't been talked about enough.
So, Dave Aramid, let's get your thoughts on this. On one hand, yes, he will be labeled a convicted felon. That the history books will record that. And we know the judge wants to go through with this to validate the jury's findings, the process, the legal system. Look, it played out to its conclusion. So that would be one side of it. The other, what Charles just said, the punishment is basically meaningless. What do you think?
Jonathan, Trump cares about his place in history. He will become the first ever president who is a convicted felon. He cares about that. And that's why he's going to appeal the underlying conviction all the way to the Supreme Court. And to get to your and Stephanie's point that there is no other ramification for it, well, in Palm Beach County, he will not be able to vote. He'll be a convicted felon. Now, I do think that Governor DeSantis will make a special case out of him to make sure he gets his voting rights back. But once the sentence is imposed, then the question is, can he vote? Again, he will be treated differently than everyone else, but for a time, that will be in question. Now, what's most interesting about this hearing is that Trump is being treated like every other criminal defendant, which is that you have to appeal after sentencing. Trump said, no, I want to go to the Supreme Court before sentencing. And the Supreme Court justice said no, at least 5 of them did. And credit Judge Merchan for this. He was smart and savvy. The reason why Chief Justice Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett sided with the liberals in the 5-4 decision was because Judge Merchan took the punishment off the table. So they said this sentencing will not have any real impact upon Trump's transition. So let it go forward, and Trump can just appeal this case afterwards like everyone else.
So, Yasmin, let's go back to you there outside the courthouse. What's the very latest as to what's going on inside?
Things are happening pretty quickly, Jonathan, and I'm looking down, obviously, to kind of read this document as it's happening in real time. And just a couple of things that have taken place. So first and foremost, they discussed the pre-sentencing report, which essentially lays out the president-elect's history, his criminal history. For instance, the only objection that Todd Blanche, the defense attorney, had to this pre-sentencing report, and that, as he put it, quote unquote, circumstances have changed. What I imagine he means by that is he is now president-elect 10 days away from taking the White House. We have just heard from Joshua Steinglass, who is a member of the prosecuting attorney's team, in which he said, quote, and I'm quoting here, that people recommend a sentence of unconditional release. So that is where we stand at this point. That is something that we expected, obviously, when Judge Juan Merchan issued that we would be going to the sentencing date today. He said it would be this unconditional release likely. And now we're hearing from the people, in fact, saying, and I quote once again, the people recommend a sentence of unconditional release. Jonathan.
So, Chuck, no surprises so far. Give us your read as the early moments of the proceedings.
No surprises at all. I mean, this is a fairly typical and predictable path, given that Judge Merchan said that he was inclined to an unconditional discharge, no penalties attaching. One thing to watch for, or to listen for in our case, Jonathan, Mr. Trump, like all defendants, has a right to allocute, meaning he has a right to speak at his own sentencing. He doesn't have to, It's a right, but not an obligation. I am curious to see if he says anything, and if he does, what he has to say.
So let's bring in now Vaughn Hilliard, also outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. And Vaughn, you, of course, covered the Trump campaign day in, day out. And let's take a moment here and just put this in perspective. Yes, it is true. There's not going to be much teeth to this punishment. Donald Trump is not going to see the inside of a prison cell. That said, this is still a moment for history. He is the first former president to be convicted of a crime, to be deemed a convicted felon. And not only that, in 10 days' time, precisely 10 days from today, he will be president again. So let's just take a moment and think about what this all really means.
Right, Jonathan. I mean, if you go off the timeline that the prosecution presented, the conspiracy to improperly influence the 2016 election was hatched almost a decade ago. We're just a few months shy of when that Trump Tower meeting took place, in which Michael Cohen and David Pecker of the National Enquirer sat down with Donald Trump and came up with an agreement, as the prosecutors alleged and the jury found him guilty of coming up with a scheme that over the course of the next year of his candidacy, that they would go and seek to purchase stories that were damaging to Donald Trump and go and promote other stories that were not based necessarily in fact about other candidates like Ted Cruz and Ben Carson and Marco Rubio in order to damage their campaign. And if you look at where we are 10 years later, he's about to enter the White House for a second time. And in so many ways, what this trial ultimately provided the public record was an accounting of not only the alleged affairs that he has continued to deny that he had with Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal, but also the extent to which he was willing to use those who worked for him and other close allies, from Hope Hicks to David Pecker to Michael Cohen, as a means of protecting himself. It was Michael Cohen who said that they had multiple conversations about that payoff to Stormy Daniels. And it was ultimately at a time in which the FBI raided the home and office of Michael Cohen and took some of his cell phone and other devices, that on social media, on Twitter, that Donald Trump publicly suggested that he hoped that Michael Cohen wouldn't flip on him. And that is where that relationship frayed. And Michael Cohen stood out as somebody who, unlike so many who have previously closely worked with Donald Trump, he ended up effectively flipping on Donald Trump and coming here to this Lower Manhattan courtroom and testifying about the relationship and acknowledging that he did it as a means of protecting, in his words, Donald Trump. And we have seen Donald Trump turn on others in his political time in office. And now there is, of course, we're looking at somebody here who is entering the White House just 10 days from now, and yes, will be known as a convicted felon with that label on it. At the same time, those 7 weeks, I don't think should be forgotten from the public record, because so many individuals who were so deeply close to Donald Trump came here and publicly testified to a jury about the power dynamic that Donald Trump has undoubtedly continued to wield in his power of influence, whether it be through the Trump Organization or during his political campaigns or inside of his White Houses.
Yeah, Vaughn, to your point, this is undeniably now part of Donald Trump's story. So, Dave Arambert, let's go back to you and talk about his relationship with the legal system. I mean, the institutions and the legal system held in 2020 during his efforts to overturn the election. Seems like he's had a lot of victories since, and his stall tactics worked with these variety of cases. Then he made the bet that he could win and make most of them go away. But he's had a few setbacks. The 11th Circuit Court ruled against him. Even the Supreme Court denied his last-ditch effort here to prevent this sentencing. Although I read his statement when he said he respected the court, he knew this was a relatively small matter. He didn't want to alienate them for some bigger stuff. He might need them down the road. So that's my question to you. As we take this moment, what lessons, what foreshadowing might we see going forward between Trump's relationship and the judicial system?
Trump is not going to be shy about attacking judges. He is very disappointed with Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who has broken away from the court conservatives and has ruled against him now on a couple things. She was against the court on their broad immunity ruling. Yes, she voted with them on the ultimate decision, but she castigated the court for going too far. And so I do think you'll see Trump continue to attack judges and prosecutors who are on the other side. But you're right. In this case, he knows he needs the Supreme Court justices because he's going to appeal this case all the way up to them. And the reason why he's got a legitimate argument because of the immunity decision that was so broad is that in the trial that took place after the decision, before the immunity decision came out, the state introduced two witnesses, Madeline Westerhout and Hope Hicks, who were both White House employees. They were minor witnesses, but because their testimony was admitted into the New York case, that gives Trump the ability to go to the Supreme Court and say, they violated your decision, overturn the whole thing, and he could ultimately win and get this whole thing overturned. So yes, he lost the battle before the Supreme Court yesterday, but he still may win the war.
So let's go now back outside the Lower Manhattan courtroom. Yasmin, what's the latest there? What has the Manhattan DA's office been saying?
So after we heard about the recommendation from Steinglass, in which he said, and I'll remind folks that people recommend a sentence of unconditional release, he essentially is recounting the case, right? Establishing why it is, in fact, Donald Trump should be seen as, the president-elect should be seen as a convicted felon, and there should be.
Okay, guys, I'm going to go to CNN. Yikes. Here we go. Sorry. Share screen. Thank you, Jason. I am going to do that. CNN. Share.
Disrespect for the process. Steinglass acknowledges that any other conditional discharge has the potential to interfere with Trump's obligations. So what the prosecutor is saying here is any sentence other than nothing, conditional discharge, could get in the way of him becoming president. So far, the focus of the DA has been on Trump's conduct beyond the hush money payment. I suspect they'll get to that soon.
Wow. And a huge note here, Steinglass is noting, we've all remember this phrase being used, of course, and how prevalent it has been. Steinglass noting that the probation officer who interviewed Trump for the probation report wrote that Trump believed that he was, quote, above the law. Now, this, Paula, is monumental to think about because, again, people at home understanding the process of what's going on. Once you are convicted of a crime or have a jury verdict, there's a period of time in which you are interviewed by a probation officer who will get a sense for the judge and be the liaison to the judge to determine what the appropriate sentence would be. Are they remorseful? What do they have to say about the process? Are there community standards or community statements being made? For this to be written, this is a really important statement that the judge will likely consider, even though he's already shown his hand about how he views the conditional and unconditional discharge here.
Yeah, and look, this is not wrong. After a decade of covering Trump's legal issues, it is fair to say that in many instances, he believes he is either above the law or somehow protected by the law. And again, since the conviction in this case, the law has changed and given him at least some ground to stand on to argue that there are parts of this case, evidence that was brought in that the Supreme Court now says could potentially be official acts and may have to be tossed out. Now, the prosecutor is saying that a sentence of unconditional discharge preserves Trump's status as a convicted felon while he pursues his appeals. But I will also note in the federal cases that Trump is facing, he didn't say, look, no laws apply to me. He just said, I am in a different status because I am a former president when it comes to the classified documents case. He believes the attorney general should have allowed him to come in, speak to him one-on-one. He believes that he occupies, again, a different status than the average citizen and should be treated differently. The Justice Department, also the Manhattan DA, formerly the Georgia prosecutor, didn't see it that way.
Well, Caitlin, Todd Blanche is now up. He's saying, I very much disagree with much of what the government just said about this case. The idea of governing and the ability to govern with this label overhead, convicted felon, is one that has gotten under the craw of the president-elect, although there are arguments to be made that this case would not interfere with his ability to govern, given there would be no probation, presumably no jail time, or even a fine, which would be virtually minimal. Trump looking while Blanche is speaking next to him, not reacting to what his attorney is saying. But the idea of governing, why is this continuing to be part of the discussion that the Trump team will likely argue that they're unable to govern with that label of convicted felon?
Well, they're just arguing that essentially none of this should be happening, that they should not be here as part of the sentencing right now. This is what they argued against, not only delaying it. I mean, they wanted to delay it, in effect, past January 20th to where it wouldn't have to occur even. That was really what Trump wanted here was for this to not happen at all. And so now that they're in the room, that was a legal argument that they have been making ever since he was elected and won the election in November, saying that he's too busy doing this, that he couldn't attend today's hearing. That's why he's appearing virtually via Zoom from Mar-a-Lago. He was just here in Washington yesterday for President Carter's funeral. I think once they get past this, and what Trump's attorneys have also tried to argue to him, and kind of not just his attorney's view, but the view inside his orbit, is that, as Paula was noting earlier this morning, this is probably the best case scenario in this situation when they came here. You know, after sitting through every day of that trial and then how quickly that guilty verdict came down, they were arguing that from what happened last May to where they are now, that this is one of the best outcomes that Donald Trump could have gotten here. Now, does that mean he's not angry about having to sit here for a Zoom appearance in front of the judge that he has belittled and criticized at length? No, but they're looking at this and noting that they do intend to appeal this. It was a question of who is going to be appealing this once Donald Trump is in office and all of his attorneys presumably are working inside the government. But they are continuing to argue against just the merits of this case overall.
And Ellie, Blanche is saying that a majority of the American people should agree, or also agree, that this case should not have been brought. And one of his arguments is that all of what the government is saying is presupposing the legality and legitimacy of having been able to bring this action. You yourself have been critical about evaluating whether this case under the statutory premise should actually have been brought. This is what, of course, the court had. He's saying it's a very sad day, and Trump is now speaking. We are waiting to see what he had to say. Remember, we will have the audio of this. The judge ordered to have it be essentially silenced until after the conclusion of the sentencing. But his attorney teeing him up, saying that it's a very sad day for President Trump, for his family, and
Did you hear
continuing
that?
with his viewpoints
We're going to
about
have the
what this
audio
would mean
right
and
after.
portend.
Fantastic.
Ellie,
Oops, sorry.
This is not novel. We often expect to hear from the defendant, but this moment is historic.
Yeah, so I'm eager to see what, well, here we go. Donald Trump begins by saying this has been a very terrible experience and a setback for the New York court system. As you say, Laura, in any sentencing, the defendant has the option to address the court. Sometimes defendants choose not to do that, especially if they're intending to appeal. But clearly Donald Trump is speaking now. He's going to be, it sounds like so far he's being characteristically aggressive. He says this has been a terrible experience, a setback for the New York court system. And as you said, this is sort of the fundamental disagreement here. The DA, and the judge will agree with the DA, has said this was a righteous case. No man is above the law. But Todd Blanche's argument that he made, that it sounds like Trump is echoing, and here Trump says this is the case that Alvin Bragg did not want to bring, is that this case should never have been brought, that it was politically motivated. What Trump's referring to there, this is a case that Alvin Bragg did not want to bring. That's not true. Alvin Bragg declined to bring a separate case, but Alvin Bragg chose to bring this case. And I see Trump now says of the DA, quote, he thought it was from what I read and from what I heard, inappropriately handled before he got there. Trump is sort of mishmashing several different stories in his head because there was a separate investigation of a separate crime that Alvin Bragg, when he took office in 2022, declined to charge. But that had to do with Donald Trump's finances. This hush money case is a case, look, I disagree with the decision, but Alvin Bragg made the decision to bring this case. And obviously he and his office, the Manhattan DA's office, stands behind it. I see Trump said, quote, he said I was falsifying business records, falsification of business records. That is the underlying charge here. The hush money payments are at the core of this case. The falsification is the actual crime.
In large respects, we're hearing a lot of what he's saying in the halls of the court after each proceeding or during the breaks. He was always very, very steadfast in his belief that these were attorneys' expenses, that this was not a cooking of the books, that this was overblown. He's going after the indictment and the charges after he chose, of course, not to testify in the trial. And here he is describing again, the legal fees were put down as legal expenses. He's always thought this was odd. We're going to hear more from what the president-elect, soon to be president, is saying at his own sentencing in his hometown of Manhattan.
Okay, so I'm taking a bit of a break right now during the commercial break. And Yeah. So bye, Jaroslav. I know that everyone cannot fully stick with us right now, but I am sticking with you if you want to stay here together and watch what is happening. What our understanding is, based on the reporting just now on CNN, is that as soon as the hearing is over, the judge is going to release the audio of the hearing. I want to stick with you. I'm assuming the hearing is going to be over shortly, and we can play the audio and listen to it together. And I think that's going to be illuminating. On the other hand, maybe you folks just want to be done, and we can call it quits right now at 10 a.m. So I guess I want to know, please, in the chat, tell me what you want. Do you want to stick together, however many of us there are, and watch this together? Or should we just kind of call it quits? So please let me know in the chat. I'm going to reapply my lipstick while you tell me. Let's see if I can do this. Julia Cooper says stay. Michelle says stay together. Let's hang out. Okay, guys, I want to hang out with you. Why should I watch this alone, right? Okay, so I'm just trying to see what is going on. Oopsies. Oh, I'm having trouble. Guys, I need to go back to my CNN and see if I can get it going again while we're talking. Okay, I want to watch live. Continue to log in. It's just doing some stuff to me. So we are going, oops, there it is. It's logging me in with my Xfinity. Hell yes. Watch now. And I think we're good. Let me see if I can share the screen. Let's see if I can do this. Yeah, I'm sharing the screen. Oh, here we go. Let's do it.
This is CNN Breaking News.
Good morning. You were live in the CNN newsroom. I'm Jim Acosta in Washington. We are following multiple breaking stories at this hour. The sun is rising on the West Coast, revealing another day of horror and heartbreak in Los Angeles. 5 wildfires are still ravaging LA County. Entire neighborhoods are scorched. The death toll now at 10 and expected to rise. More than 10,000 homes and businesses have been destroyed, and high winds returning today, putting a strain on firefighters. Plus, right now, President-elect Donald Trump is being sentenced for his conviction on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in the New York hush money case. And in just moments after that, the Supreme Court will hear arguments on whether the federal government can ban TikTok. But we begin this hour in Southern California, where several major wildfires are raging through the Los Angeles area, devouring entire neighborhoods and killing at least 10 people. That death toll almost certain to rise. More than 10,000 buildings have burned.
I know it's terrible that the fires are burning in California, but we are not here. I'm not an expert in that, and I don't want to take from CNN that footage at this moment. But I am going to keep, I'm keeping my eye right now on when Jim Acosta is going to return to the scene outside of the courtroom in Manhattan. I'm a little shocked that it's already 10:02, and I actually thought that by now the sentencing would be over. But of course, the sentencing probably is not yet over. My guess is because Donald Trump may be still complaining. I don't really know what is happening inside of that courtroom in Manhattan. And so we are sticking together right now. I still have a tiny bit of coffee left. And, we will stay together for this until we get to that point. So just to revisit where we are, Donald Trump is going to be very shortly the convict in chief. We are waiting for the hearing to be over Here we go, Jim Acosta. And I'm going to add the sound for you right now.
The ruling follows a 5-4 decision by the Supreme Court to deny Trump's last-minute appeal last night. CNN's Laura Coates is outside the New York court. Laura, walk us through where things stand right now. A lot of things happening at this very moment.
Well, we may not have been here, but for the Supreme Court last night deciding in a 5-4 decision, a very tight ruling where Chief Justice John Roberts and Justice Amy Coney Barrett joined with the so-called liberal justices to say that this could go forward. We knew from the judge it was unlikely that this is going to be a jail imposition or a probation period or a fine. The judge has now had an opportunity to review a probation report written in connection with interviews from the president-elect and the probation officer, who said during the report that it seemed that Trump believed he was, quote, above the law. Meanwhile, Donald Trump, the president-elect, soon to be president in just 10 days, is arguing that the indictment itself should never have been brought. The Manhattan DA, Alvin Bragg, was wrong to bring this, and that, in fact, the American people, according to Todd Blanche, who will be number 2 at the DOJ following his inauguration, has believed that the American people did not want a case like this to be brought under a category of lawfare. The judge, Judge Merchan, has said, which is the understatement of a lifetime, this has been a truly extraordinary case. Indeed, it has been. We have never seen a time when an American president, former, of course, or president-elect, has been convicted of felony counts, this to the tune of 34. Now, it is a Class E felony in the state of New York, which normally does not necessarily bring a jail time. It's not universally accepted as that, but it doesn't always have jail time. But the idea of no probation, no fine is directly connected from the decision of the judge, it seemed, and we're waiting to hear that final point. This is a president-elect who has argued that he would be unable to fully govern if he were to have certain contingencies or conditions above him. He does note, the judge said, it is the office of the presidency that is extraordinary, not the occupant of the office. But again, he is a president-elect. Trump wanted this to be delayed until after he became the president again. The judge thought it was incumbent on the decision to honor the jury's verdict and, of course, the rule of law to allow this particular defendant and all defendants to have the finality of a sentence. Jim, although we are using the phrase convicted felon, there is a slight nuance to this. It is not a done deal until after the sentence, and then that's the catalyst to be able to have your full appellate rights and go after all the different legal issues here. Merchan says that once the courtroom doors closed, the trial was no different from any other in the courthouse. I was in that courthouse. I got to tell you, what was so extraordinary, aside from the fact that it was the former president of the United States there, is that he was being treated, and in a courtroom, unlike any other, not like any other defendant, when the rule of law and the criminal prosecution and the weight of your name after a jurisdiction versus is in front of you.
Yeah, and Laura, I guess when this is all said and done, and you were just saying, and we've all been saying, we expect there not to be a sentence of jail time or anything like that for the president-elect. But take us through the next steps. He'll be able to appeal the conviction. That process continues on even while he's president?
Oh, yes, he wants it to continue on. He does not want this title of convicted felon. He does not believe that this case should have been resurrected according to the laws and on the books. But remember, ever since this case even started, he was convicted and a verdict entered back in May of last year. The Supreme Court has issued this interim opinion about immunity, that not only can you not prosecute a sitting president for official acts, but you can't use official acts to then form the basis of evidence in criminal matters. Trump believes that his statements and statements that were made to people who were a part of the administration and beyond, whether it be Hope Hicks or others, should not have been allowed to be entered into the evidence and therefore could have unduly tainted the jury's view of the case. Merchan is saying, however, the considerable, indeed extraordinary legal protections afforded the office of the chief executive is a factor that overrides all else in his sentencing. But remember, he's a president-elect, so a lot of that is not applied to him yet, and the judge wanted this done beforehand. This will be quite a slap on the wrist. I'm curious if the judge will, in fact, address the contempt or even the statements Trump has made about the judge and his family as well.
All right, Laura Coates, thank you very much. With me now, CNN anchor and chief White House correspondent Caitlin Collins and CNN senior legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Ellie Honig. Ellie, let me go to you first. What's your reaction to what we've been hearing so far?
Well, it's pretty orderly, all things said. Donald Trump seems to have gone on a little bit of a tirade, but nothing unpredictable, nothing different from what he said before. One thing that I think is interesting is there's been no talk whatsoever, except from Donald Trump, about the actual conduct that Donald Trump was tried and found guilty for. For a while, the DA was trying to say this conduct of hiding the hush money payments. Okay, there we go. So that's the official moment of the sentence. Donald Trump has now been sentenced to an unconditional discharge.
What does that mean?
That means that it is now official, that Donald Trump has been convicted of a felony. There's two parts of that equation, the conviction, and now we have part two, the sentence. So that is a moment. We now have Donald Trump. I guess you can technically, if you would like, to call him a convicted felon.
Is off the bench.
Yeah.
It happened that quickly.
In a lot of ways,
over.
not.
Okay, so what we're going to wait for now is the release of the audio. Donald Trump has now been convicted. Guys, it's 10:09. The audio is going to be available soon. And I am going to actually, at this moment, call it a day. I really appreciate all of you. And I will see you bright and early on Monday morning in a world that is crazy. Love you guys. See you soon. Monday morning. Convicted